A cleaner was accused of stealing million-dollar contracts and lost her job in front of everyone. But what happened next shocked the whole country. Hello friends, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. The city was still half asleep when Rose Taylor stepped off the bus at Avenida Paulista. It was not yet 6 o'clock, and the streetlights still glowed against the pale dawn, casting long reflections on the rain-slicked sidewalks. Her footsteps echoed in the cavernous lobby of Horizon Corporation, a building of glass and steel that looked more like a monument than an office. Security guards nodded at her with the quiet familiarity of men who had seen her arrive at the same time, every day, for years. Rose always smiled back, polite, precise, predictable. That was how everyone knew her. Punctual, reliable, invisible in the way only the cleaning staff could be. She changed into her uniform in the basement locker room, the faint scent of detergent clinging to her hands. The elevator carried her upward, climbing past floor after floor of quiet darkness, until the doors opened on the 12th floor. This was the realm of directors. Offices with wide glass panels, leather chairs, and carpets that muffled every sound. She liked the silence here. It was clean, orderly, and in those hours before dawn, it felt as though the whole place belonged to her. Rose worked with a rhythm that had become second nature. Dusting shelves, polishing the long conference table, emptying trash bins lined with shredded paper. Her hands moved steadily, almost ritualistically, as if the act of cleaning itself anchored her in a world that was too often indifferent to her presence. She hummed softly, careful not to disturb the stillness. When she entered Henry Campbell's office, she paused. The chief financial officer's room was spacious and immaculate, except for a neat stack of folders spread across his desk. Rose had seen them before, contracts, reports, things she never dared to read. She only arranged them, aligning edges, smoothing creases in the paper as though order alone could protect the importance they carried. Her reflection in the office window looked older than she felt inside. 48 years had marked her with lines of worry, but her eyes remained clear. She remembered her children, Isabella and Peter, both grown, both still calling her every Sunday. She thought of her late husband, whose absence had left silence in her small apartment. Work kept her upright, steady, useful. Horizon Corporation was not her dream, but it was stability, and stability was precious. She placed the folders precisely, aligned pens on Campbell's desk, and left the office as spotless as it had been the morning before. It was routine, unremarkable, yet comforting in its repetition. By the time the first wave of employees arrived, Rose had already completed half her tasks. She moved through hallways unnoticed, a shadow at the edge of their corporate world. Later that morning, whispers began to circulate. Something was missing. People spoke in hushed voices near the elevators, glancing over shoulders. Rose caught fragments, contracts, millions, Campbell furious. She carried her cart past them, pretending not to hear. Gossip was not for her. She had learned long ago that the safest way to survive in a company like Horizon was silence. But silence did not protect her for long. At noon, her supervisor tapped her on the shoulder. "Rose, Mr. Harris wants to see you." Mark Harris, head of human resources, rarely called in cleaning staff. Her heart skipped, but she nodded, washed her hands, and walked toward the 14th floor. The HR office was bright, clinical, lined with motivational posters about teamwork. Harris sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Next to him was a laptop, screen turned slightly toward her. Rose stood, hands clasped in front of her, waiting. "Rose," Harris began, his tone heavy with practiced neutrality. "We've reviewed security footage from this morning." He pressed a key, and the video played. Grainy black and white images showed her entering Campbell's office, touching the folders, shifting papers. The timestamp glowed on the corner of the screen. "These contracts," Harris said, sliding a printed image of the documents across the table, "are missing. Do you have any idea what happened to them?" Her breath caught. "I only cleaned, as I always do. I put them in order. That's all." Harris leaned back, folding his hands. "Unfortunately, the evidence suggests otherwise. You were the last person seen handling these documents. Given the gravity of the loss, the company has decided to terminate your employment. Effective immediately." The words fell like stones. Terminate. Effective immediately. She wanted to protest, to cry, but her throat closed. You think I stole them? Harris avoided her eyes. The footage is clear. I'm sorry, Rose. It's out of my hands. When she left his office, security guards escorted her through the lobby. People stared. Carla Johnson at the reception desk looked down quickly, avoiding her gaze. Mary Lewis, another cleaner, whispered something to a colleague but did not speak up. The humiliation burned hotter than anger. She had given years of her life to this building, and now she was nothing more than a criminal in their eyes. Outside, the sky had turned gray with afternoon rain. She walked to the bus stop, clutching the small plastic bag that held her uniform and belongings. Her chest ached, her dignity torn apart. She sat heavily on the bench, tears blurring the street into streaks of light. For the first time in decades, she felt truly alone. Then a voice broke the silence. "Excuse me," a man said, standing beneath a black umbrella. His suit was elegant but not ostentatious, his expression calm, observant. "You're Rose Taylor, aren't you?" She blinked, startled. "Yes, do I know you?" He offered a faint smile. "Edward Martin. Martin Consulting." He extended a business card, the rain glistening on its edges. "I saw what happened inside, and I don't believe you did what they say." Rose looked at him, speechless. In the midst of her disgrace, a stranger's words of faith felt like a lifeline. The bus arrived, splashing water onto the curb. She hesitated, holding the card in trembling fingers, unsure whether to trust him or herself. The door of possibility had cracked open, but the storm had only just begun. The rain had not stopped when Rose returned to her apartment that evening. She lived on the eastern side of Sao Paulo, in a modest building painted in fading yellow. The neighborhood was noisy, alive with the clamor of children playing football in narrow streets and the distant hum of traffic, but inside her apartment silence hung heavy, pressing against her chest like a weight. She closed the door and leaned her back against it, holding the business card Edward Martin had given her at the bus stop. The ink was simple, elegant, Martin Consulting. Edward Martin, CEO. She placed the card on her kitchen table as though it were fragile glass. Trust had never come easily to her. She had been raised to believe that dignity was earned through work, not through favors from strangers in expensive suits. Yet Harris's words echoed in her ears, effective immediately. The humiliation replayed itself in fragments. The laptop screen showing her hands on the documents, Carla's downcast eyes, the guards flanking her like she was dangerous. She made tea but did not drink it. Her thoughts wandered back to the days when she first joined Horizon Corporation nearly 15 years earlier, when Peter was still in school and Isabella had just entered university. Her husband, Miguel, had been alive then, still working at the factory, still coming home with grease on his hands and laughter in his voice. She had taken the job because it offered stability, health insurance, something to keep the family afloat. She had promised herself it would be temporary. But then Miguel's accident happened, and temporary became permanent. Rose sat at the table, tracing the rim of her cup. The card seemed to stare at her, daring her to pick it up again. She thought of her children. Both of them had their own lives now. Isabella married, Peter building a career abroad. She could not burden them with this shame. Not yet. Her phone vibrated. A message from Carla Johnson. "Rose, I'm sorry about today. I didn't know what to do. Please don't hate me." Rose's fingers hovered over the screen, then lowered. What was there to say? Forgiveness was not so simple. She typed only, "I understand." Then she placed the phone face down, her eyes drifting once more to the card. Later that night, sleep eluded her. Memories surfaced. Miguel's funeral, the first day she put on the Horizon uniform, the birthday she had worked through so her children would never feel the emptiness she had endured growing up. In her dreams, the office lights glared down at her, and folders scattered across Campbell's desk like accusations. The next morning, the routine was broken. No uniform, no bus at dawn, no silent corridors to clean. She wandered aimlessly through the city, her body restless. The thought of being idle terrified her more than the shame of dismissal. She passed by Horizon's building, but could not bring herself to look up at it. She imagined her former colleagues whispering about her, pointing fingers, reducing her to a story they would tell over coffee breaks. The cleaner who stole millions. By midday, exhaustion pushed her into a cafe. She ordered nothing but water and sat by the window. The card was still in her purse, edges bent now. She pulled it out, studying it again. Against her better judgment, she dialed the number. The line clicked. A male voice, professional and warm. Edward Martin speaking. Her throat tightened. Mr. Martin, this is Rose. Rose Taylor. You gave me your card yesterday. Ah, yes, he said immediately, as though he had been expecting her. Thank you for calling. I was hoping you would. Are you free this afternoon? I'd like to meet properly, somewhere more comfortable than a bus stop. She hesitated. I don't know if. Please, Edward interrupted gently. You don't need to decide anything now. Just come. Let me listen. An hour later, she found herself at a discreet office building not far from Avenida Faria Lima. Martin Consulting's lobby was a contrast to Horizon's cold grandeur. Here, soft chairs and warm colors replaced glass and steel. The receptionist greeted her with kindness, not suspicion. Edward himself appeared soon after, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was younger than she had thought, perhaps in his mid-50s, but with the calm assurance of someone who had weathered storms and learned not to fear them. His eyes, gray and steady, met hers with no trace of pity. Rose, he said, handing her a cup. I know this is difficult, but I want you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Not just what happened yesterday, but what Horizon means to you. At first her words came haltingly, but as the minutes passed, she found herself speaking freely, about her years of service, about the pride she had once felt, about Miguel's death and the children she had raised. Edward listened without interrupting, his attention unwavering. When she finished, her voice trembling, he placed his coffee aside. I believe you. More than that, I intend to prove your innocence. I've already asked my legal team to review Horizon's protocols. There are gaps, logs of access, security clearance, patterns of behavior that don't match yours. If you're willing, we can pursue this together. Rose shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. Why? You don't know me. Why would you risk anything for someone like me? Edward leaned forward. Because truth matters. Because I've seen people destroyed by lies, and I refuse to let it happen when I can do something about it. Horizon may think they've closed the book on you, but I intend to reopen it. His conviction frightened her almost as much as it comforted her. If you do this, they'll come after you too. People with power don't like being challenged. He smiled faintly. I've faced worse. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Rose felt the first flicker of something she thought she had lost forever, hope. That night, back in her apartment, she wrote in her journal for the first time in years. A stranger believes me. I don't know if I can believe myself yet, but maybe that's enough to begin. But as she closed the notebook, her phone buzzed again. This time, the message was anonymous. Stay quiet. Stop meeting with Martin, or things will get worse for you. Her hands went cold. She looked at the words until the screen dimmed. Somewhere in the city, someone was watching her, someone who already knew that Edward Martin had stepped into her life. The shadows were moving, and she was no longer invisible. Rose barely slept after receiving the anonymous threat. The glow of her phone screen haunted her through the night, every vibration making her heart race. She kept imagining footsteps in the corridor outside her apartment, shadows behind her curtains, unseen eyes tracking her movements. By dawn, her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind remained sharp with fear. She debated whether to tell Edward. Part of her wanted to protect him, to avoid dragging him deeper into whatever storm was brewing. Another part of her feared that silence would make her complicit in her own downfall. In the end, she decided to wait. Trust was difficult, and fear weighed heavier than courage. When Edward called that morning, his voice carried no trace of doubt. Rose, I've already begun. My lawyer, Daniel Whitmore, is reviewing the security logs. We're finding irregularities. Irregularities. The word pulsed like a spark of hope. She listened as Edward explained. Multiple logins to Henry Campbell's office outside of official hours. Entries marked under a different name, but suspiciously clustered around the same days she had cleaned. The patterns suggested premeditation, not accident. Someone wanted you on those cameras, Edward concluded. The folders were deliberately left in disarray, so you'd touch them. That footage was never about proving guilt. It was about planting it. Rose's chest tightened. But if that's true, then someone at Horizon set me up. Exactly. And I intend to find out who. Her instinct was to beg him to stop. She could still hear the threat on her phone. Stop meeting with Martin. Yet as he spoke, conviction replaced fear. Maybe Edward's presence in her life was no accident. Maybe it was time for someone to see her not as invisible, but as a woman worth defending. Later that week, Edward invited her to accompany him to a meeting. "You don't have to speak," he said. "Just listen. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful weapon." The meeting took place in a law office downtown. Daniel Whitmore was tall, lean, his voice crisp as he walked them through evidence. He displayed printouts of access logs, highlighting entries made at odd hours: midnight, 3 a.m., times when Rose had been home in bed. The login ID belonged to Roger Allen, Campbell's executive assistant. Rose remembered Allen vaguely: slick suits, clipped tone, a man who moved through the 12th floor with the quiet arrogance of someone who considered himself indispensable. She recalled once offering him a polite greeting in the hall. He had barely nodded. "Allen has motive," Daniel said, adjusting his glasses. "Bank statements show unexplained transfers into his accounts. Not Horizon payroll. Foreign deposits, likely from a competitor." Edward leaned back, folding his arms. "Stellar Apex, perhaps?" The name meant nothing to Rose, but Daniel's nod confirmed its weight. "We can't prove it yet, but the pattern is clear. Allen has been passing internal documents for months." He used Rose as a scapegoat, knowing the cameras would catch her. Rose's stomach turned. She had feared humiliation, but this was something darker: conspiracy, betrayal woven into her routine. "If you expose him," she asked softly, "what will happen to me?" Edward's eyes met hers. "Justice, but only if you're willing to endure the storm first." The storm arrived sooner than she expected. That evening, as she returned home, she found her mailbox overflowing with flyers defaced with her name. Thief, liar, criminal. Neighbors stared as she pulled the papers free, her face burning with shame. Someone wanted her silence, and they were willing to strip away every shred of her dignity to get it. When she called Edward in tears, he said only, "This is proof we're close." "They're afraid. That means we keep going." Rose held the phone, trembling. For the first time, she wondered if her fight for innocence would destroy her before it saved her. And yet, deep inside, a voice whispered, "I will not disappear quietly." The next day, Horizon made an official announcement. Henry Campbell himself declared that a former employee was under suspicion of corporate theft. They did not name her, but everyone knew. Rose's face became synonymous with betrayal, plastered across gossip blogs and whispered through corporate hallways. The humiliation was complete, but the fire of defiance had begun to kindle. And when Edward's lawyer revealed the next set of documents, emails from Roger Allen's private account, referencing deliveries to Stellar Apex, the pieces of the trap became clear. Rose's voice, steady now, broke the silence of the office. "Then it's time they know I won't be their scapegoat." The revelation of Roger Allen's involvement shifted everything. For days, Edward and Daniel pored over the evidence, connecting bank transfers with confidential documents that had leaked. Each discovery felt like a lifeline, pulling Rose out of the abyss of suspicion. But the closer they drew to the truth, the more dangerous the shadows became. One evening, Edward invited Rose to his home for safety. His apartment was on the 21st floor of a modern tower overlooking the city. The space was warm, filled with books and photographs of travels. For Rose, who had lived her entire adult life in modest spaces, it felt like stepping into another world. "Stay here tonight," Edward insisted, "at least until we know the threats have stopped." She wanted to protest, to cling to her independence, but exhaustion won. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear, until the shrill ring of Edward's phone shattered the peace at 3 a.m. Daniel's voice on the other end was urgent. "We've been hacked. Someone tried to erase the logs from Horizon's servers. They nearly succeeded." Edward swore under his breath. Rose sat upright, heart pounding. "Does that mean the evidence is gone?" "Not entirely," Daniel replied. "We had backups. But whoever's behind this knows we're closing in. They're desperate." Rose looked at Edward, fear creeping back into her chest. "They won't stop, will they?" He placed a hand on hers. "No, but neither will we." The following day brought another shock. Henry Campbell himself requested a private meeting with Edward. Rose insisted on going, though her stomach churned with dread. The meeting was held in Campbell's expansive office, the same one where Rose had once aligned his papers with quiet care. Now she entered as an accused criminal, flanked by the man who believed in her. Campbell's expression was stern, but not hostile. He gestured for them to sit. Martin, I know what you're doing. You're building a case against Roger Allen. But you should be careful. The board won't thank you for dragging this company into scandal. Edward leaned forward. The scandal already exists. You just don't want to admit it. Campbell's jaw tightened. Allen has been loyal for years. I trust him. I cannot believe he would sabotage Horizon. Rose's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. And yet you believed I would? The question silenced the room. Campbell shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away. For the first time, Rose saw cracks in his certainty. But before the meeting ended, Campbell delivered the unexpected twist. If you continue this path, Martin, you'll find yourself fighting more than Allen. You'll be fighting Horizon itself. Edward stood calmly. Then so be it. As they left, Rose felt the weight of those words. It was no longer a battle against one man's lies. It was a battle against the machinery of power itself, a company determined to bury the truth to save its name. That night, Rose returned to her apartment to find her door slightly ajar. Panic surged through her chest. She stepped inside, hands shaking. Drawers had been opened, papers scattered. On her table lay a single folder, unfamiliar, marked only with the words, "Stop or pay the price." The war had escalated, and Rose knew there was no turning back. The folder left in Rose's apartment remained on her kitchen table like a silent threat. Its black letters, "Stop or pay the price," echoed in her mind each time she walked past. She refused to open it, certain that whatever it contained would only deepen her fear. Instead, she called Edward. He arrived within an hour, his calm presence grounding her trembling hands. "You can't stay here anymore," he said firmly after scanning the ransacked room. "They're trying to intimidate you. That means we're hitting close to the truth. But it also means you're in danger." Rose wanted to argue, but exhaustion pressed down like lead. She nodded silently. For the next week, she split her nights between Edward's apartment and Daniel's secure office. The arrangement was uncomfortable at first. She had spent her life depending on no one but herself. Yet as she sat across from Edward in the quiet evenings, sharing stories of their pasts, a fragile alliance began to form. He spoke of his father's company, of betrayal he had once faced in business, of the vow he had made to protect those who could not protect themselves. Rose listened, surprised by how much his stories mirrored her own struggles with dignity and loss. But alliances outside that circle were harder to come by. Carla Johnson, the receptionist who had once turned away during Rose's humiliation, reached out again. This time she asked to meet in person. They sat in a crowded cafe, the noise masking their conversation. Carla's eyes darted nervously. "Rose, I wanted to speak sooner, but I was afraid. People are saying Roger Allen threatened staff. That if anyone defended you, they'd regret it. I have a child, I can't risk my job." Rose swallowed the bitter taste of betrayal. "You watched me walk out in disgrace. And you said nothing." Carla's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I'm sorry. But listen, there are things I've seen. Roger was always in Campbell's office late at night. Papers, USB drives, meetings with people I didn't recognize. If you're building a case, maybe I can help now." It was not forgiveness, but it was a step toward truth. Rose accepted, though part of her heart still ached with resentment. Meanwhile, divisions grew sharper. Mary Lewis, her fellow cleaner, avoided her entirely. When Rose tried to reach out, Mary muttered only, "Don't drag me into this, Rose. I can't afford trouble." The isolation cut deeper than any insult. Years of quiet camaraderie dissolved in fear. Rose realized the battle was not only for her innocence. It was for the courage of those too afraid to stand beside her. At Martin Consulting, Daniel compiled the testimonies and evidence into thick binders. He placed one on the table before Rose. "This is the beginning of your redemption. But it won't be enough unless we find the smoking gun. Proof Allen was selling Horizon's contracts to Stellar Apex." "How do we find it?" Rose asked. Edward's expression hardened. "We go directly after his communications. Emails, messages. That's where people slip." Their plan was dangerous, skirting the edges of legality, but necessity had no patience for rules. Daniel arranged for a digital forensic expert to recover deleted files from Horizon servers. What they found chilled Rose. Threads of messages between Roger Allen and an anonymous contact, codenamed Apex 7. The language was cautious, but unmistakable. Requests for packages, confirmations of deliveries. Payment references aligned perfectly with the unexplained transfers to Alan's account. The evidence was damning. Yet when Daniel prepared to move forward, an unexpected obstacle appeared. Henry Campbell summoned Edward once more. This time, the CFO was not alone. 3 board members sat with him, their expressions severe. "Martin," Campbell said, his tone cold, "you're stirring chaos. This company has weathered storms before, but we will not tolerate baseless accusations. If you pursue this, we will blacklist you. Your firm, your clients, everything." Edward did not flinch. "And if I walk away, you'll let an innocent woman's life be destroyed." The board members exchanged glances. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Be careful, Mr. Martin. Sometimes the truth costs more than lies." The meeting ended without resolution, but Rose felt the weight of new enemies pressing in. She left the building with Edward, her hands trembling. "You'll lose everything because of me?" she whispered. Edward shook his head. "No, Rose. Because of you. I found something worth risking everything for." For the first time, she believed him. Yet when they returned to Daniel's office, the expert who had uncovered the emails was gone. His workstation had been wiped clean, his phone disconnected. On the desk lay a single note. "You are not ready for what you're chasing." The alliances they had built suddenly felt fragile, and the divisions around them more dangerous than ever. The disappearance of the forensic expert left Rose shaken. It was as if the ground beneath her had turned to water, every step threatening to drag her under. Edward tried to reassure her, but his eyes betrayed the tension he carried. Daniel, however, refused to be deterred. "We still have backups," he said, producing a USB drive. Before he vanished, the expert uploaded copies to our secure cloud. Whatever scared him away, it wasn't enough to erase the truth. Rose exhaled slowly, relief mixing with dread. If the truth was preserved, it meant their enemies would become even more ruthless. They spent long hours reviewing the files. Among them was a single thread of emails that stood out. Roger Allen had written, "The cleaner will touch the papers again tomorrow. Cameras will confirm. After that, no one will question." Rose read the words over and over, her hands trembling. It was the confirmation of what Edward had suspected all along. She had been deliberately framed, her honesty weaponized against her. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "He used me like a pawn, like I was nothing." Edward placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, he underestimated you, and that will be his undoing." But the revelations did not stop there. Among the files were logs of access to Horizon's financial servers. At least 5 times in the past 6 months, Allen had downloaded sensitive contracts and shared them externally. Each incident coincided with a suspicious payment into his account. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. Millions of dollars funneled through discrete channels, all while Horizon remained blind. Daniel prepared a comprehensive report, but before they could decide on the next move, Rose received another message. This one was not anonymous. It was from Mary Lewis. "We need to talk. I know things. Meet me at the park near the old fountain. Tonight." Rose's heart pounded. Mary had avoided her for weeks. Why now? She debated whether it was a trap. Edward insisted on accompanying her. The park was nearly empty, dimly lit by street lamps. Mary appeared from the shadows, her uniform still smelling of bleach and soap. Her eyes were wide with fear. "I can't keep quiet anymore," Mary whispered. "I saw Roger that night. He was in Campbell's office long after hours. He carried folders to the parking garage. But when I mentioned it, he told me I'd lose my job if I spoke again. I thought he'd ruin me. But seeing what they're doing to you, I can't stay silent." Rose reached for her hand, gratitude welling up. "Thank you, Mary. This means everything." Before Mary could respond, a sharp noise cracked through the night, tires screeching against asphalt. A black car pulled up near the fountain. 2 men stepped out, their movements quick, deliberate. Edward pulled Rose back instinctively. Mary's face went pale. "They followed me." The men advanced, but before they could reach the trio, a whistle from a nearby patrol cut through the air. A police car rolled down the path, and the strangers retreated into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as they had come. The danger was undeniable now. Rose was no longer just a scapegoat in a corporate scandal. She was a target in a game far larger than herself. As they left the park, Mary clutching Rose's hand, Edward turned to her. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the weight of certainty. "This isn't about Horizon anymore," he said. This is about survival. And from this moment, we fight back with everything we have. Rose looked at him, the fear in her chest transforming into something sharper, resolve. The secrets had been revealed, and with them, the path forward. But she knew that the closer they came to exposing Roger Allen, the more dangerous the night would become. The night at the park had changed everything. Rose could still hear the screech of the tires, still see the pale terror in Mary's eyes. Someone had wanted to silence her, just as they had wanted to break Rose. The difference now was that silence was no longer possible. Back at Edward's apartment, they sat around his dining table. The city lights shimmered through tall windows, but the mood was heavy. Daniel spread documents across the polished wood, bank records, access logs, transcripts of Allen's emails. Mary sat nervously in a corner, her hands twisting the hem of her blouse. "This is enough to present to the authorities," Daniel said. "Allen's network is undeniable. He's been leaking Horizon's contracts to Stellar Apex for months, maybe years. The money trail is irrefutable." Rose leaned forward. "Then why wait? Let's bring it to them." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Because Allen isn't the only one. Look at the timestamps. He couldn't have done this alone. Someone higher is protecting him, someone with access to override security protocols. If we move too soon, they'll bury it, and you'll be crushed again." The words chilled her. She had thought her fight was with one man. But now it seemed the roots of corruption reached deeper, twisting around the very foundations of Horizon. Edward spoke firmly. "Then we don't go to the authorities yet. We prepare. We gather until it's undeniable. And then we confront them in a way they can't ignore." The decision was made. There was no turning back. That week, Rose lived a double existence. By day, she moved cautiously through her neighborhood, trying to remain invisible. By night, she pored over documents with Edward and Daniel, her exhaustion outweighed by a burning need for justice. She discovered parts of herself she had forgotten: courage, endurance, the fierce will of a woman who had survived loss and humiliation. Mary became an unexpected ally. Though timid, she provided crucial details about Roger Allen's habits, his late-night arrivals, his cryptic phone calls, the visitors who slipped into Campbell's office after hours. Each piece added weight to their case. Rose felt a flicker of guilt for her earlier resentment, but Mary's bravery reminded her that people could change when pushed to the brink. Still, the threats continued. Rose received another message, this time slipped under Edward's door. "The next bus stop won't save you." The words cut deep, reminding her of that humiliating day when Edward had first approached her. The implication was clear: her enemies knew her past, and they would twist it into her future. One evening, Edward caught her staring at the note. "They want you afraid," he said quietly. "But fear means they know they're losing." Rose nodded, though her heart still pounded at night. The turning point came when Daniel's research uncovered a file hidden deep within Horizon's archives. It was a confidential memo from Henry Campbell himself, approving late-night access for Roger Allen. The approval was vague, unexplained, but enough to raise suspicion. Campbell knew, Daniel said. Or at least, he chose not to ask questions. Rose's breath caught. The man whose office she had cleaned every morning, whose papers she had carefully aligned, had stood silently while her life was destroyed. Whether through negligence or complicity, he had been part of her downfall. That realization lit a fire inside her. The humiliation she had endured was no longer just personal, it was systemic. Campbell had allowed her to be sacrificed to protect his own reputation. "This ends with all of them," Rose whispered. Edward met her eyes. "Yes, but it will cost us everything." She took a deep breath. "Then let it cost. I've already lost what mattered most, my name. I want it back." The decision hung in the air like a verdict. There would be no retreat, no compromise. The next move would carry them to the heart of the storm. The following days blurred into a storm of preparation. Edward's team expanded their search, contacting discreet allies in finance and cybersecurity. Rose, once a cleaner moving quietly through empty offices, now found herself poring over digital trails of corruption. Each revelation fueled her resolve, even as the danger grew. Mary remained at her side, though fear gnawed at her. "They'll come for me next," she whispered one night. "I've seen too much." Rose squeezed her hand. "You've been brave. You don't have to do more." But Mary shook her head. "No. If I stay silent again, I'll never forgive myself." Together, they uncovered more. Allen's transactions were traced not only to Stellar Apex, but also to shell companies across 3 countries. It was a web of deceit far larger than Rose had imagined. For every contract stolen, Horizon lost millions, and Allen gained leverage over those too cowardly to stop him. The weight of the truth pressed heavily, but with it came a fragile sense of power. Rose was no longer a victim waiting for judgment. She was part of the hunt. Yet consequences arrived swiftly. One afternoon, as she walked back from the market, Rose noticed a man following her. His suit was too neat, his pace too measured. When she turned abruptly, he stopped to check his phone. She hurried home, her pulse racing. By the time she reached her building, the man was gone. But the message was clear: she was being watched. That night, Edward insisted on additional security. From now on, you're never alone. If you need groceries, we'll go together. If you need to step outside, call me first. Rose bristled at the restriction. I've taken care of myself for years. And look where it's brought you. Edward replied gently but firmly. This isn't weakness, Rose. It's survival. The conversation ended with silence, but she knew he was right. Meanwhile, Horizon's leadership began to sense the cracks forming. Campbell called an emergency meeting, instructing staff to avoid speaking to outsiders. Rumors spread that audits were coming, that the company was preparing to control the narrative. For Rose, the words were a bitter reminder. Control had always belonged to those in power. But soon, evidence would speak louder than lies. Then came the unexpected blow. Daniel received a call from a journalist, a woman named Ana Torres. She had somehow caught wind of the investigation and demanded an interview with Rose. Someone inside Horizon leaked this, Daniel warned. If we refuse, they'll publish speculation. If we agree, we expose ourselves early. Rose wrestled with the decision. Public exposure terrified her, yet the thought of telling her story in her own words burned with appeal. For years, others had spoken for her, or over her. Now, maybe, she could speak for herself. She agreed to the meeting. The interview was held in secret, in a small office Anna had rented downtown. Rose told her everything. Her years of service, the humiliation of her dismissal, the threats, the evidence against Allen. Her voice trembled, but she did not falter. Anna listened intently, promising confidentiality until the investigation was ready. When the interview ended, Rose felt lighter, as though a burden had lifted. But the relief was short-lived. 2 days later, a headline blazed across a business blog. Horizon scandal. Cleaner at center of missing contract speaks out. Someone had betrayed their agreement. The article twisted her words, painting her as desperate, clinging to claims of innocence while throwing accusations without proof. The backlash was immediate. Online commenters mocked her, some calling her a liar, others demanding she be jailed. Horizon released a statement dismissing the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. The betrayal cut deep. Rose felt her chest tighten, shame returning like a wave. I should never have spoken, she whispered, tears burning her eyes. Edward's voice was steady. No, Rose. This only proves we're close. They're scrambling to discredit you. That means the truth frightens them. But in the quiet of night, as she stared at the city lights from Edward's balcony, Rose could not shake the weight of consequence. Her name was once again dragged through the mud. And somewhere in the distance, Roger Allen was still moving pieces, still watching. The next step would either shatter their enemies, or shatter Rose entirely. The distorted article gnawed at Rose's spirit. She had stepped forward, spoken her truth, and it had been twisted into another weapon against her. The shame that once clung to her uniform now clung to her very name. Strangers online mocked her. Colleagues whispered with renewed conviction that she was guilty. But this time, something inside her did not break. Instead, the betrayal hardened into resolve. She had nothing left to lose, except the truth. Edward and Daniel redoubled their efforts. Ana Torres, the journalist who had promised confidentiality, reached out in desperation. It wasn't me, she insisted during a tense call. I swear it. My notes were stolen. Someone hacked my files. They wanted your words out in the open before you were ready. Rose wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed. The idea of trust felt fragile, like glass in her hands. Meanwhile, Daniel uncovered something far darker. A hidden archive within Horizon's server contained years of correspondence between Roger Allen and Stellar Apex. These were not casual leaks. They were systematic, deliberate. Contracts, strategies, confidential negotiations, all sold piece by piece. The archive revealed the scale of betrayal. Horizon had lost not millions, but billions, while Stellar Apex thrived. One email chilled Rose more than the others. Alan had written, "Taylor is perfect. Her routine is predictable, her presence unnoticed. Cameras will capture everything. No one will question her guilt." Her breath hitched as she read the words. She had been chosen precisely because she was invisible. Her honesty, her punctuality, the very qualities that defined her, had made her the perfect scapegoat. Tears blurred the screen. For years she had believed her invisibility was safety. Now she saw it for what it was, vulnerability. Edward placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is the smoking gun. They can't deny it now." But Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. Alan won't fall alone. Someone above him gave cover. Without proof of that, Horizon will simply throw him to the wolves and close the case. Rose's name will never be cleared fully." The buried truth was deeper than they had imagined. And to unearth it, they would have to confront the company itself. The pressure mounted. Mary began receiving threats at work. Anonymous notes in her locker, whispered warnings from colleagues. One night, she called Rose in tears. "I can't take this anymore. They know I spoke to you. If they fire me, I have nowhere to go." Rose listened, torn between gratitude and guilt. "You're not alone anymore, Mary. Stay strong. Please." The storm grew louder when Edward received an anonymous call. A voice, distorted and cold, warned, "If you don't stop, Martin, you won't live to see the truth revealed." Rose overheard the call. Her fear was no longer for herself, but for the man who had risked everything for her. "Edward," she whispered that night, "maybe we should stop. I can endure this. I've endured worse." He looked at her with quiet defiance. "No, Rose. You endured humiliation. Now it's time you see justice." It was in that moment she understood. This was no longer just her battle. It was theirs. The next morning, Daniel prepared their case into a single, devastating dossier. "We'll bring this to Horizon directly. Force their hand. They can't bury it if we lay it before the entire board." Rose's chest tightened. The thought of stepping once more into that building filled her with dread. She remembered the day of her dismissal, the stairs, the silence, the guards at her side. To return was to relive her worst humiliation. But as she looked at the stack of evidence, she knew there was no other way. The buried truth was ready to rise. The plan was simple in theory, but dangerous in execution. Confront Horizon's board of directors with the evidence, expose Roger Allen's betrayal, and force them to clear Rose's name publicly. In practice, it meant stepping into the lion's den. Edward arranged the meeting through quiet channels, leveraging his reputation and business connections. The board, though reluctant, could not ignore a figure of his stature. The appointment was set, the 15th floor of Horizon Corporation, conference hall at dawn, before the day's operations began. The night before, Rose could not sleep. Memories flooded back. The first time she had polished the long table in that room. The pride she had once felt in being part of the company, even from the shadows. And then the day it all ended, when those same halls had become a prison escorting her out. She stood by Edward's balcony, the city sprawling beneath her, and whispered a prayer into the night, not for victory, but for strength. Meanwhile, Daniel rehearsed the strategy. "We begin with financial evidence. Unexplained transfers to Allen's accounts. Then the server logs, showing access outside working hours. Finally, the emails naming Rose as the scapegoat. It will be undeniable." Rose nodded, though fear gnawed at her. What if they deny it anyway? What if they twist it, like they twisted my words to the press? Edward's eyes held hers. "Then we go public. This time on our terms. I've already arranged journalists to be on standby. If the board refuses, the world will hear the truth by nightfall." The weight of it pressed down. Tomorrow could destroy Horizon, or destroy her all over again. That evening, she spoke with Isabella and Peter. She had kept them at a distance until now, ashamed to involve them. But on the eve of confrontation, she needed their voices. "Mom," Isabella said softly over the phone, "we never doubted you. Not for a second. Whatever happens, we're proud of you." Peter's voice followed, steady and resolute. "They tried to erase you. Tomorrow, make them remember who you are." Tears slid down Rose's cheeks. For the first time, she felt not only supported, but carried. The morning arrived with heavy clouds over Sao Paulo. Rose dressed not in her old uniform, but in a simple navy blouse and skirt. Unremarkable, yet dignified. Edward met her in the lobby, Daniel carrying the thick dossier under his arm. Together, they ascended to the 15th floor. The conference hall was vast, lined with tall windows that caught the gray light. The board members sat in silence, their faces carved from stone. Henry Campbell sat at the center, his expression unreadable. Roger Allen stood nearby, his suit immaculate, his smirk faint but mocking. Rose's knees trembled, but she stood tall. For years, she had been invisible. Today, she would be seen. Edward opened the presentation. Daniel laid out the evidence, piece by piece, each revelation heavier than the last. Bank transfers, server logs, emails calling Rose the perfect scapegoat. Gasps echoed around the room. Whispers rose. Allen's smirk faltered. Campbell's hands clenched on the table. This is impossible. No, Edward said calmly. This is truth, and it's time you face it. Rose's heart thundered. The confrontation had begun, but as Allen shifted uneasily, she saw something in his eyes. Not guilt, but calculation. And she realized the battle was not yet won. The true fight was about to begin. The boardroom was heavy with silence after Daniel finished presenting the evidence. Pages of incriminating documents lay scattered across the polished table, their damning weight undeniable. The directors shifted in their seats, some pale with shock, others tight-lipped with anger. Roger Allen stood rigid by the window, his jaw tense, his composure unraveling with each passing second. His smirk was gone, replaced by the wary calculation of a man who realized the walls were closing in. Henry Campbell finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost pleading. Roger, tell me this isn't true. Tell me this is some fabrication. Allen's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes flicked to Rose, then to Edward, and finally to the pile of evidence that left no room for denial. His silence was louder than any confession. One of the board members slammed a fist on the table. This is treason against the company. Years of contracts stolen, billions lost, and all while we blamed. He glanced at Rose but hesitated, shame flickering in his eyes. Edward seized the moment. While you blamed her, while you humiliated an innocent woman and paraded her as a criminal, Allen used your blind trust to destroy Horizon from within. And Rose Taylor paid the price. All eyes turned to Rose. Her heart pounded, her knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself to stand straighter. For years she had been invisible, a shadow in their hallways. Now they saw her clearly, and she would not shrink from their gaze. I never took anything from this company, she said, her voice trembling but strong. I gave you my time, my loyalty, my dignity, and you repaid me with suspicion and disgrace. You let me be your scapegoat because it was easier than asking hard questions. But the truth has a way of rising, no matter how much you try to bury it. The board members shifted uneasily. Some avoided her eyes. Others stared with dawning respect. Campbell turned to Allen, his tone hard. Do you deny this? Allen's mask cracked. You think I acted alone? His voice rose, sharp with desperation. You think I could move all those files, transfer millions, without someone higher up turning a blind eye? Gasps rippled across the room. Allen's words cut deeper than any evidence. They hinted at rot beyond one man's betrayal. Edward stepped forward, calm but firm. Name them, Roger. Who else is complicit? Allen's jaw clenched. His eyes darted across the room, landing briefly on Campbell before settling back on the floor. He said nothing. The silence spoke volumes. Daniel produced the final piece of evidence, a signed approval from Campbell authorizing Allen's late-night access. Though vague, the implication was damning. Campbell's face went ashen. This isn't proof I knew, Campbell protested, his voice shaking. I trusted him. I didn't question. And that, Edward interrupted, is your failure. Whether you turned a blind eye or joined in the scheme, you allowed an innocent woman's life to be destroyed. The room erupted into murmurs. Some board members demanded Allen's arrest. Others called for Campbell's resignation. Security was summoned. Roger Allen, cornered at last, sagged into his chair, his bravado collapsing. As guards escorted him from the room, his eyes met Rose's. For a fleeting second, she saw not arrogance, but something close to regret. Yet no apology passed his lips. The confrontation was over, but the truth had left its mark. Campbell stood slowly, his shoulders heavy. Miss Taylor, I can't undo what was done, but I will ensure your name is cleared. Publicly, the company will issue a statement of apology and compensation. It's the least we can do. Rose inhaled sharply, tears threatening. She had dreamed of this moment, yet it felt surreal, distant, like watching someone else's life. The humiliation of her dismissal could not be erased, but vindication shone like dawn after endless night. Edward turned to her, his eyes steady. This is your moment, Rose. They see you now. She nodded, but her gaze lingered on the empty chair Roger Allen had left behind. The battle was won, but the scars would remain. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her story was only beginning. The weeks that followed unfolded like a whirlwind. Horizon Corporation issued a public apology, acknowledging Rose's wrongful dismissal. Her image appeared on national news, not as a thief, but as a woman who had been betrayed by the very system she had served. The scandal shook the business world, forcing Horizon to implement sweeping reforms, independent audits, stricter oversight, and the creation of a new whistleblower program. But none of it erased the memory of her humiliation. Rose accepted the apology, but forgiveness was harder. She had lost her livelihood, her peace, her dignity. And though Roger Allen faced prosecution and Campbell's resignation soon followed, the wounds in her heart remained raw. It was Edward who offered her a new path. One evening, as they sat in his office surrounded by stacks of legal papers and press clippings, he said, "Rose, this doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning. I want to start something with you. A foundation, an institute for workers who have faced injustice like you did. Not charity. Justice. A voice for the invisible." The words struck her deeply. For years she had lived unseen, erased by the indifference of others. Now Edward was offering her the chance to turn her pain into purpose. Together, they founded the Rose Taylor Institute for Social Justice. At first, it was small, just a team of volunteers in a modest office. But the story of her ordeal had resonated across the country. Donations poured in, partnerships formed, and soon the Institute was providing legal aid, advocacy, and resources for workers who had been silenced or mistreated. Rose became the face of the movement, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. She stood before audiences, her voice steady as she spoke of dignity, resilience, and the need for change. Where once she had scrubbed floors in silence, now she commanded rooms with her truth. Her children stood proudly beside her. Isabella spoke at the inaugural ceremony, her voice trembling with emotion. "My mother taught me that integrity is not about never falling, but about rising when the world tries to bury you." Peter followed, his words fierce and resolute. They tried to erase her, but instead she became a beacon. Even Roger Allen, from prison, sent a letter of apology. Rose read it in silence, her heart conflicted. She chose not to answer immediately. Forgiveness, she knew, was not about erasing pain but transforming it. Months later, she replied with a simple note. "You destroyed my life, but I will not let hatred destroy yours. Find a way to make amends." The act freed her. Years later, as the Institute grew into a national force, Rose returned to the same bus stop where Edward had first spoken to her. The afternoon sun bathed the street in golden light. She sat on the bench, the same bench where she had once wept in despair, and watched as people hurried past. This time, she was not invisible. Some recognized her, nodding in respect, others pausing to thank her. She closed her eyes, breathing in the sounds of the city, the laughter, the traffic, the pulse of life. The place of her humiliation had become the symbol of her rebirth. The journey had not erased the scars, but it had given them meaning. Rose Taylor had been broken, accused, discarded. But she had risen. And in rising, she had given others the courage to rise too. The story that began in silence ended in hope. And the world, at last, could see her. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.